The president acted today in the face of Republican paralysis on two proposed immigration bills, each containing language on keeping families together. And again, just as a reminder, the president didn't really need Congress to act, as he demonstrated today. That, however, was quickly pushed aside by the breaking news. Joining us now with his take on it is Senator and former presidential candidate Bernie Sanders. Senator Sanders, thanks for being with us. I'm wondering what your reaction is, first of all, to the news that the 2,300 kids who have been separated from their parents will not be reunited with them, and it's not clear when or how they will be, or if.
You know, Anderson, there's almost nothing that one can say. The idea of tearing little children from the arms of their parents, putting them into detention cages, and then making a big deal about an executive order which may do absolutely nothing for these 2,300 children is literally beyond belief. Trump, once again, has lied. He told the American people that this was a policy created by Congress, could only be addressed by Congress. He was lying. Of course, it was a crisis that he created and attempted to address today, but he didn't go anywhere near far enough. So where we are right now is close to 2,400 kids are still separated from their parents. There is no understanding, as your reporters have indicated, when these children will be reunited. Furthermore, we have a situation where the Trump administration now, their solution is to provide indefinite detention. So I presume that for the new people who are arrested, they will be with their children in jail for an indefinite period of time because the Trump administration wants to undo the Flores settlement, which focuses on the needs of children and limits to 20 days the number of days that children can be in jail. Bottom line to all of this is that this country needs fundamental and comprehensive immigration reform, which deals with this issue, which deals with the DACA crisis, and which deals with the 10 million people who are undocumented in this country right now.
The president is saying he wanted a longer-term solution, and that's what he was holding out for. He obviously was blaming the Democrats. Do you believe this executive order was anything other, really, than a public relations Band-Aid?
Look, I say this often, and I don't want to be misunderstood. I don't mean to be overly partisan, but we have a president who lies all of the time, including on this issue. Just the other day, you correct me if I'm wrong, he was saying, I can't do anything about it. This is congressional action that is needed. Well, it turned out, of course, that was not true. He created the crisis. He could end the crisis. So I think what has happened is when you have millions of Americans, my phone lines in Burlington and here in Washington are bouncing off the hook. People in Vermont, and I know people all over this country, cannot believe that in the United States of America we're putting these kids into detention camps. So there's outrage. You have Laura Bush talking about this action being eerily reminiscent of what happened to Japanese Americans during World War II. That is from the wife of a conservative Republican president. You have the Pope speaking out on this issue. You have leaders all over the world saying, what is going on in the United States of America? So I think Trump had to respond to that. But clearly he sees, from his political perspective, that being anti-immigrant is a winner for him politically. I don't think it is, but that's his logic. And he will continue to mount a very strong anti-immigrant effort. By the way, in the midst of all of this stuff, so we don't get distracted, we had the leadership in the Republican leadership in the House talking now, after giving $1 trillion in tax breaks to the top 1%, coming up with a budget that would make massive cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. So, go ahead, I'm sorry.
You talked about the Flores settlement, which limits how long kids can be held in detention to 20 days. Is it clear to you, I mean, the administration clearly wants to reverse that in the courts. It's not clear they're going to be able to do that. The judges very, very easily could just say, no, that's what the court ruling was. That court ruling is going to hold. If, in fact, they're not able to change that ruling, is it clear to you what happens? Do the separations resume if the court says no, the Flores settlement remains, you can't hold these kids for more than 20 days, therefore, do they go back to separating them?
Well, you're asking a good question of which nobody knows the answer, I think. What you're suggesting is as I understand it, is if the parents remain in prison, then the children cannot be held for more than 20 days. You're asking what happens to those kids.
Right.
And you're right. I don't think anybody knows the answer, but it may well mean that those kids will then be separated from their parents. And here is the absurdity. I think we have a mechanism now to keep track of those families, to make sure that they get to court when they should get to court. And by the way, you can do that for a much lower cost to the taxpayers than imprisoning parents and children.
You're talking about ankle monitoring or even house arrest in some cases, which has been
right. There are ways.
It's a lot cheaper.
Yes, that's right. Certainly, and let's not forget, I mean, at the bottom line of this thing, I want everybody to appreciate the trauma. I suspect permanent psychic trauma to a child of 3 or 4 who cannot speak English, who was suddenly taken away from his or her parents, put into a private detention center surrounded by people in uniform. My God, you don't have to be a child psychologist to know that the damage that has done. And your question is a good one. We don't know what happens if the Flores settlement is maintained. Will Trump release the parents with the children, or will he keep them separated?
In terms of what's happening in Congress, where, as I said, the administration insists on placing responsibility, there's a Republican, what the Republicans call a compromise bill in the House, which Republicans are actually divided on. There's also a more narrow Republican bill in the Senate. Have you seen any piece of legislation that you could support that has any chance of passing both chambers?
No. I think what the Republicans, there are 2 pieces of legislation. One is bad, one is worse. And here is the irony. The irony is that the American people overwhelmingly, poll after poll after poll, want comprehensive immigration reform. The American people are appalled at the separation of children from their parents. The American people want differing opinions, but a majority of the American people believe we should have comprehensive immigration reform and a path towards citizenship. So that is the issue that some of us in the Senate have worked on, and yet we're not certainly getting any support from the president, who sees anti-immigration as, I guess, a good political strategy for him.
Is the president, finally, I mean, is he using this to try to get funding on the border wall? I mean, is that sort of the bottom line for him? Because clearly he felt, he didn't get the funding that he wanted earlier, and there were obviously concerns raised by some of his supporters that he was looking weak on immigration, on illegal immigration.
Yeah, maybe, I don't know. But I think more importantly, you have a president who has given tax breaks to billionaires, who wants to cut programs that working people desperately need. And he thinks, as authoritarian types all over Europe believe, that if you can foment anger against immigrants and show how strong and tough you are on those little children, that it will get you votes in elections. I think that's pretty pathetic, but I think ultimately that is his strategy.
Senator Sanders, appreciate your time. Thank you.
Thank you.